Raoul Wallenberg was born in 1912 in a wealthy and influential Swedish family. The Wallenbergs were renowned bankers and diplomats, their influence stretching across Europe. Raoul grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege, yet he developed an acute awareness of the world beyond his immediate surroundings. From an early age, he displayed a strong sense of justice and empathy, traits that would later define his extraordinary actions. He studied architecture in the United States, but he never pursued a traditional career in construction or design. Instead, he gravitated towards diplomacy and international affairs, understanding that influence and negotiation could save lives in ways that bricks and mortar never could. By 1944, Europe was in chaos. Nazi Germany had expanded its control across the continent, leaving millions in fear and despair. Hungary, once considered a relatively safe haven for Jews, became a focal point of the Nazis' genocidal policies. Hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews had already been deported to Auschwitz, and those who remained lived in constant terror. When Wallenberg arrived in Budapest in the summer of 1944, he was officially a Swedish diplomat assigned to help Hungarian Jews. Unofficially, he became something much more, a savior. With the support of the Swedish government and covert backing from the United States War Refugee Board, he began issuing special protective passports. These documents declared the bearer under Swedish protection. They were not always legally binding, but in the chaotic environment of occupied Budapest, they often worked. Soldiers and officials, confronted with a man who radiated authority and determination, frequently accepted them without question. Wallenberg's approach was bold and hands-on. He did not remain behind a desk issuing papers. He ventured into the streets, sometimes into the most dangerous parts of the city, personally handing protective passports to those in immediate danger. Witnesses described seeing him climb onto train roofs, pull terrified passengers from cattle cars, and insist that German officers allow him to protect these people. In some cases, he bribed officers. In others, he intimidated them with his sheer confidence and determination. His methods varied, but his goal was always the same: to save as many lives as possible. In addition to the passports, Wallenberg rented dozens of buildings throughout Budapest and declared them Swedish territory. These safe houses provided shelter for thousands of Jews, shielding them from deportation and execution. He personally visited these buildings, ensured they were stocked with food and essentials, and organized security so that no one could be removed against their will. By late 1944, Wallenberg had become one of the most feared men in Budapest, not for violence, but for his ability to undermine the machinery of genocide. Nazi officials knew that any interference with his activities could have diplomatic repercussions, and many hesitated to confront him directly. His bravery was matched only by his ingenuity. He used every tool at his disposal, from official paperwork to personal persuasion, to protect lives. As Soviet forces approached Budapest in early 1945, the city was on the brink of liberation. But danger for Wallenberg increased. In January, he left the city under Soviet escort, ostensibly to meet with a Soviet commander in Debrecen. He was never seen free again. The Soviet Union initially denied knowledge of his fate. Decades later, they claimed he died in prison in 1947 of a heart attack. Yet no evidence, no body, and no grave were ever produced. Former prisoners later testified that they saw a foreign diplomat in Lubyanka prison years after his reported death. Some described a man who spoke multiple languages fluently and refused to reveal his identity, while others suggested the Soviets suspected him of espionage. Why would such a man be detained under such conditions? Why keep him alive if he posed no direct threat? And if he died, why conceal it for decades? The questions remain unanswered, making his fate one of the most enduring mysteries of the Second World War. Wallenberg's impact, however, is undeniable. It is estimated that through his actions, he directly saved tens of thousands of Jews, and indirectly, his efforts contributed to the survival of over 100,000 people. He combined courage, intelligence, and empathy, demonstrating that one individual could make an enormous difference even in the face of overwhelming evil. His story is not only one of heroism, but also of the complexity of war, diplomacy, and human morality. The context of his actions is important to understand fully. Hungary in 1944 was a country under occupation, where fear and suspicion were pervasive. The Arrow Cross, a fascist and anti-Semitic party, was aligned with Nazi Germany and carried out violent attacks, deportations and executions of Jews and other minorities. The city was tense, chaotic, and dangerous, yet Wallenberg navigated this environment with precision and courage. He had to understand not only the bureaucracy and procedures of the Nazi administration, but also the psychology of the soldiers and officers he confronted daily. Bravery alone would not have sufficed. He needed strategy, planning, and quick thinking. Every decision he made carried life or death consequences. Wallenberg's protective passports were more than pieces of paper. They were symbols of hope. People who received them clung to them as their lifeline, often hiding them under clothing, carrying them at all times, and placing them where they could be quickly shown to authorities. These documents, combined with his personal presence, created a shield of authority and legitimacy that often deterred those intent on deportation or harm. His safe houses were equally critical. Each location had to be strategically chosen to provide accessibility, concealment, and resources. Staff, volunteers, and sympathetic locals assisted in maintaining these sanctuaries. Inside, residents could experience a degree of normalcy. Children could play. Families could eat together, and individuals could rest without fear of immediate arrest. This human element was central to Wallenberg's efforts. It was not merely about paperwork or legal maneuvers, but about preserving dignity, humanity, and life itself. Despite his immense efforts, Wallenberg faced personal risk at all times. Reports indicate that he was constantly under surveillance, threatened and harassed by both German and Hungarian officials. His courage was matched by his discipline, as he refused to be intimidated, and his mission always took precedence over his own safety. The winter of 1944 was particularly brutal. Budapest was cold, food and supplies were scarce, and the city was under bombardment and artillery attacks. Wallenberg continued his work often at night, moving through dangerous neighborhoods to ensure the vulnerable were protected. He coordinated with other diplomats, relief organizations, and local volunteers to maximize his impact, demonstrating exceptional leadership under pressure. After the war, the world began to learn of Wallenberg's deeds. Survivors recounted stories of a man who appeared at trains, in the streets and at safe houses, who spoke firmly yet kindly, and who embodied hope. These accounts spread, and Wallenberg became a symbol of courage, moral clarity, and action in the face of unspeakable evil. The mystery of his disappearance added a layer of legend and tragedy. Investigations were hampered by Cold War politics, secrecy, and the passage of time. Attempts to locate him in Soviet archives yielded little information, and his story remained partly obscured for decades. Modern historians continue to research, piecing together fragments from testimonies, documents, and memoirs, but definitive answers remain elusive. His legacy is commemorated globally. Streets, schools, and monuments bear his name. Yad Vashem in Israel honors him as righteous among the nations, recognizing the extraordinary courage he demonstrated. His methods, combining diplomacy, initiative, and direct action, serve as a model for humanitarian work in conflict zones today. Beyond the immediate historical context, Wallenberg's story invites reflection on moral responsibility. It raises questions about how ordinary individuals respond to systemic injustice, how courage can manifest in bureaucratic and non-violent ways, and how the choices of one person can ripple across generations. The complexity of his actions, the danger he faced, and the ingenuity he demonstrated make him one of the most compelling figures of the Second World War. In analyzing his life, it is clear that Wallenberg exemplified the principle that moral courage does not require weapons, armies, or governments. It requires vision, empathy, determination, and the willingness to act decisively when others hesitate. His protective passports were small instruments with enormous impact. His safe houses became havens in a world engulfed in violence. His personal bravery saved tens of thousands. It requires vision, empathy, determination, and the willingness to act decisively when others hesitate. His protective passports were small instruments with enormous impact. His safe houses became havens in a world engulfed in violence. His personal bravery saved tens of thousands, yet the unanswered questions about his disappearance remind us that history is often incomplete, that heroism can coexist with mystery, and that even those who perform extraordinary deeds may not receive justice or recognition in their lifetime. Stories of the individuals he saved continue to inspire new generations. Testimonies passed down through families recount how the presence of Wallenberg or his documents saved lives, allowed education to continue, preserved families, and enabled future generations to contribute to society. The ripple effect of his actions is profound, demonstrating that courage, when exercised with intelligence and compassion, has a lasting impact far beyond immediate circumstances. His life and disappearance serve as a reminder of the fragility of justice in times of chaos and the power of individual action. As scholars continue to examine wartime archives, as survivors recount their memories, and as historians analyze the interplay of diplomacy and courage, Wallenberg's story remains relevant. It teaches that one person can stand against overwhelming odds, that moral clarity can guide action in the darkest times, and that the legacy of courage is measured not only in deeds performed but in lives preserved and hope restored. In reflecting on Raoul Wallenberg, one appreciates the extraordinary convergence of personal bravery, strategic thinking, and moral conviction. He leveraged his privileged background, not for personal gain but for the preservation of human life. His life challenges each generation to consider how they might act in the face of injustice, how they might use their talents, connections, and courage to protect others, and how they might leave a lasting impact on the world. Wallenberg's story is a testament to the enduring value of humanity, ethics, and action in the midst of conflict. Though he vanished without trace, his actions echo across time, inspiring those who study his life, seek to emulate his courage, and recognize the profound responsibility of individuals in shaping history. By examining the details of his protective passports, the organization of safe houses, and the negotiation tactics he employed, one gains insight into how diplomacy, personal courage, and strategic action can converge to save lives. The psychological aspects of his work also highlight the importance of presence, confidence, and moral authority in persuading others to follow rules, allow exceptions, or ignore orders that would result in death. Wallenberg's story also illustrates the complexity of humanitarian work under hostile regimes, where legality, morality, and personal safety intersect. It reminds us that even in the darkest periods of history, individuals can influence outcomes and that courage can be exercised creatively, intelligently, and persistently. Today, the world remembers him not only as a symbol of heroism, but as a blueprint for action, courage, and ethical responsibility in the face of oppression. His life teaches that the combination of intellect, moral clarity, and bold action can produce results that defy expectations and leave an indelible mark on humanity. Raoul Wallenberg's story does not end with his disappearance. In many ways, it begins there. After the war, families of survivors searched for answers. Governments exchanged diplomatic notes, and investigators attempted to uncover the truth behind his fate. Sweden repeatedly requested information from the Soviet Union, but responses were vague, delayed, or contradictory. Some documents suggested he was interrogated as a suspected spy due to his connections with the United States and his access to sensitive wartime information. Others implied that he was simply a victim of the vast and unforgiving Soviet prison system, where countless prisoners vanished without record. Over time, fragments of testimony emerged from former inmates who claimed to have encountered a foreign prisoner who matched Wallenberg's description. These accounts described a calm and resilient man who maintained his dignity even in captivity, refusing to surrender his identity or beliefs. Despite these testimonies, no conclusive evidence has ever been produced, leaving historians to rely on partial records and eyewitness memories. The Cold War further complicated efforts to uncover the truth, as political tensions discouraged transparency and cooperation. Yet Wallenberg's moral legacy continued to grow. Survivors spoke publicly about how a single document or a brief encounter with him had saved their lives. Many credited him not only with survival, but with restoring their belief in humanity during a time when cruelty seemed absolute. His actions inspired later generations of diplomats, activists, and humanitarian workers who saw in his life an example of what ethical responsibility looks like. Under extreme conditions, educational institutions began teaching his story as a case study in moral courage, emphasizing that his success came not from authority alone, but from his willingness to act decisively and creatively. Memorials and statues appeared across Europe, Israel, and North America, each representing collective gratitude for a man who refused to be passive in the face of injustice. His name became synonymous with rescue and resistance without violence. Even today, debates continue among historians regarding the precise number of lives he saved. But there is broad agreement that his impact was immense. More importantly, his story challenges simplistic narratives about war and heroism. Wallenberg was not driven by ideology or fame. He acted because he believed that human life demanded protection, regardless of risk. His disappearance remains painful and unresolved, yet it reinforces the tragic reality that even the most righteous actions do not guarantee safety or recognition. Still, the absence of answers has not diminished his significance. Instead, it has strengthened his symbolic power. Wallenberg represents the idea that individuals matter, that choices matter, and that courage can disrupt even the most brutal systems. His life reminds us that history is shaped not only by armies and governments, but by people who choose to act when silence would be easier. Though his final days remain hidden, the meaning of his actions is clear. Raoul Wallenberg proved that humanity can survive even in its darkest hour, and that one person, armed only with conviction and compassion, can alter the course of countless lives. As time passes, Raoul Wallenberg's story continues to resonate because it speaks to a universal question about human responsibility. What does one do when the law becomes unjust and obedience leads to destruction? Wallenberg chose action over safety and conscience over comfort. He understood that neutrality in the face of mass murder was not neutrality at all, but silent cooperation. This understanding shaped every decision he made in Budapest, from confronting armed officers to bending diplomatic rules when lives were at stake. His actions demonstrate that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Many who survived because of him later said that what struck them most was not only what he did, but how he did it. He spoke calmly, looked people in the eyes, and treated each life as if it mattered deeply. This human approach, combined with strategic thinking, allowed him to succeed where others failed. In the decades since the war, Wallenberg has become more than a historical figure. He has become a moral reference point. His name is invoked in discussions about genocide prevention, humanitarian intervention, and ethical leadership. Governments and institutions often ask what can be learned from his example, and the answer is both simple and demanding. He acted when others hesitated. He used the tools available to him, imperfect as they were, and he accepted personal risk without expecting reward. His unresolved fate serves as a reminder that doing the right thing does not always lead to justice or closure. Yet his legacy proves that the value of an action is not measured by its outcome for the individual, but by its impact on others. Wallenberg did not live to see the world honor him, but millions live because he once refused to look away. His story endures because it challenges every generation to consider what they would do when confronted with injustice and whether they would have the courage to act.